Welcome to this February 16th edition of the Courier Paperboyz. I'm sports editor Doug Newhoff, and I'm joined this morning by our all-star team of Jim Sullivan, Jim Nelson, and Nick Pateros. Speaking of all-stars, guys, it was a big weekend in the NBA with all of their all-star festivities. I have to confess, I don't watch a lot of NBA to begin with, and certainly not the all-star type games, which I don't care a lot for to begin with, but in general, everything I read, the reviews were good. People were pretty pleased with how entertaining it was and whatnot, so it sounds like the NBA kind of rocked it. Do you guys have any thoughts?
It's kind of interesting with the NBA. I think it's one of those deals where the dunk contest and the skills competition might overshadow the All-Star game itself a little bit, especially this year with the dunk contest with Gordon and Levine. Some of the things they're doing out there were incredible. It was very entertaining. The All-Star game itself, you know, not much defense played, lots of dunks. I guess it's a entertaining exhibition, but it kind of phases out some of those All-Stars too, like LaMarcus Aldridge. You don't want to see shooting, you know, 16-foot jumpers all night or anything like that. So I don't know. It's an entertaining game, I guess, but it'd be kind of nice to see the best players in the world play against each other and try to defend it every once in a while.
Well, like I was telling these guys beforehand, the last time I might have watched the All-Star game was when Spud Webb won the dunk contest, so that might have been like 1987, 86. I do follow, you know, some of it. The dunk contest can be very entertaining, but, you know, I think the big storyline, too, is Kobe's last All-Star game. I think that brought a lot of people in and drew interest in, and, you know, there's a lot of tributes to him. On, you know, being his, you know, his last All-Star game, his last go-around, he's getting all his due, and, you know, I think for that, you know, the NBA's got its own market. You know, I do enjoy, previous years I say don't watch a lot of NBA, I do enjoy an NBA game every once in a while. I can sit down and watch a half or so. You know, it can be entertaining, so I've been getting more into it, so it's just one of those things. Yeah, I think the Kobe part and the dunk contest, like he said, on playing on what Nick said, sometimes I think the other things, the shooting, the three-point shooting and the dunk contest, they have a little more entertainment value to me.
There's a little more competition involved in those events, so I guess that raises it to a little bit to a different level.
Here's the amazing thing to me. You have Karl Anthony Towns, a Minnesota Timberwolves, who wins the big man skills competition. You have Zach LaVine, a Minnesota Timberwolves point guard, wins the slam dunk competition.
Here we go.
And where are the Minnesota Timberwolves? 17 wins, 37 losses.
Okay.
They stink. And so that tells you something about where the priorities are for this. And in fairness, the Timberwolves, they're rebuilding again. So we thought like we could expect a direct correlation between what you see in All-Star Weekend and what you see during the regular season. But you wonder, you know, where are we with this? It's only an exhibition thing, yet it gets tremendous coverage. You know, it's all over ESPN, and it really doesn't matter as far as the grand scheme of things. It's a nice way to see Steph Curry, nice way to see Kobe Bryant go out, but it gets all this hype and everything else gets kind of pushed to the side, and it really doesn't mean a thing.
Speaking of that, you know, the NBA has done things to tweak theirs, and I don't think we touched on it, but the NHL really tweaked their All-Star Weekend too, where the game was actually 3-on-3. And I was wondering, with another hockey guy, and Mr. Sullivan, what you thought about how the NHL tweaked their All-Star game?
They've tried about everything, I think. I think shirts versus skins is next on the list for the NHL. And that's another thing where no matter what they try, I don't think it's going to matter very much because you won't see a lot of the elements you see during a really good regular season, especially a playoff game, tight checking, physical play without necessarily fighting, that sort of thing. And I'm beginning to wonder now if we're at a phase with the way All-Stars games have evolved in hockey, basketball, and football, if they're going to be phased out. If they're finally just going to throw up their hands and say that's enough, where the only All-Star game that will exist and be a meaningful sort of game will be the baseball game. And I don't know that it's going to happen, but I can see a trend in that direction.
Do you think the other leagues would ever attach something like home field or home court advantage to an All-Star game like baseball does?
That's a good question. They might consider it just to give it a little more, you know, a little more meaning, a little more spice, if you will. And there's always controversy about how that's worked out with MLB. I mean, there's some people who are a little annoyed that you put the fate of a league or the fate of a team in the hands of some relief pitcher who was the fifth choice to go on an All-Star team. So there are flaws to it, but it does seem to have added some interest and some some juice to that game.
Oh, yeah, baseball by far is the best all-star game, and the way they did it before is they're just alternating years, so I'd rather have it be an all-star game than just, being on the right year, so I think that's probably the best one to watch out there.
And no matter how you size up baseball's all-star game, you still have a human being standing at home plate trying to hit something that's coming at him at 95 miles an hour, so you can't take that part of the game away like you do in football and the NBA. where-
Football, that'll never be a competitive event just because no one wants to get hurt out there.
Yeah, and I thought too, with the NHL thing, took a look, again, the most enjoyment I got was out of the skills competition, the guys shooting and breaking plates and the fastest skater contest. I mean, those are really something that you don't appreciate maybe enough until you see that, how fast they can skate or how well they can, put the puck sometimes. I mean, a lot of times they don't have that kind of time to set up the puck, but,
That's where I think all of this needs to head, is to individual skills type competitions, and forget about these team games. I mean, that don't mean anything and nobody gets excited about, and they don't play very hard. All right, let's put that on the back burner. Enough all-star talk. College basketball, I was listening to talk radio, as I have this nasty tendency to do way too often, but somebody pointed out that last week the top 25 went 27-23, and I started thinking about the parity in college basketball. So, we're coming down the home stretch of the season, and you look ahead, and it's going to be crazy. I mean, I couldn't give you even an educated guess who might be in the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, and certainly not the Final Four. So here's some other numbers that kind of illustrate the parity that is going on right now in college basketball at the Division I level. 351 teams play Division I basketball. Every one of them has at least 3 losses. That's kind of surprising. First 15 weeks of the season, we've had 6 different number 1 teams now. North Carolina, Kansas, Michigan State, Kentucky, Oklahoma, and now Villanova have all gotten their turn. They might as well give Iowa a shot too here in the next few weeks and see how long they can hang on to it. 2 weeks ago, both number 1 Oklahoma and number 2 North Carolina lost to unranked opponents. This past Saturday, 8 of the top 25 teams lost to unranked opponents. And then UNI's current 6-game winning streak is 10th best in the country, which is kind of hard to believe too. So what does all this say about the state of college basketball today?
it's really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, it really is.
I think you saw that illustrated with the Iowa schools just this past week with Iowa State losing to Texas Tech and then going and beating Texas. And then Iowa the other night, they're playing Minnesota, not to pick on Sully's home state again, but that's a team without a Big Ten Conference win, and I think that was a 4-point basketball game, so you just don't know on any given night anymore in college basketball.
And throw UNI's win at Wichita State in there.
UNI at Wichita
where
State, yeah.
nobody had won in
43 games, like 1,000 days, I think, was it,
Yeah,
or
that's
something
crazy.
like that. Do you wonder if this, going forward, this will be finally the year that where a 1 loses to a 16? Logic would tell you that that's going to happen sooner or later,
Yeah.
and given what we've seen so far this year, it could very well happen. There's always this debate with this sort of thing. Is parity good or is it bad basketball? Do we need a lot of teams that are really good, or we need a great team to add interest? I tend to lean towards a lot of good teams myself. I think that creates a broader pool, if you will, of interest, and certainly we have it this year, and as Doug suggested, we don't know really what's going to happen. I think last year the prevailing wisdom was there were about 4 teams that could win the national championship, and I think all of them got to the Final Four. This year, you could see where North Carolina could win it all or could lose in the second round.
Yeah.
You could see where Iowa could get all the way to the Final Four, or it could lose early. There are a lot of teams in that boat. I think that unpredictability really adds a lot. And I think it kind of makes up for the fact that we still have this problem with the conference regular seasons where in a lot of cases they don't mean very much when you have 8 teams out of 10 or 12 getting in the tournament.
And you have so many players going to the NBA early, too. That really has leveled the playing field when you think about it. You don't have a lot of programs that can build up a dynasty really anymore with veteran players. Your Kentuckys and such are using freshmen and sophomores all the time.
You know, I think we were talking about this before we came up here, too. You compare the women's game to the men's game. The women's game has become so 4 or 5 teams are right here. Then you have another group of teams that are about 10 to 15 points worse than those top 4 teams, and then everybody else is, you get title games where it's a 25-point difference. It's kind of boring. The women's game, I don't know what they can do, or you know, UConn has just got a dominant. Their 10th player is probably would be a star, an all-conference player just about anywhere else. And, you know, but those girls want to go there. I get it. You want to be part of somebody that's going to win maybe play 2 or 3 times in the national title game, but how can the women's game maybe develop the model of the men's? I mean, they don't have that thing. They don't have girls leaving very often, leaving early and developing that parity. But yeah, the men's game right now is really exciting. I just throwing that out there. We were talking about it before we came up here, but the men's game is exciting. I like it. It's fun. You get that NCAA tournament. You just don't know who's going to win on that day one. You can't say, okay, these guys. You think you can say this guy, but you never know who's going to win.
That's interesting that there isn't the same type of parity in women's college basketball. I mean, you do get the top-heavy teams that all the blue chip, you know, top recruits in the country all want to go there, and they don't trickle down to the other programs. And I don't think you see the development of marginal athletes in women's basketball at the mid-majors like you do in the men's basketball. So,
Yeah.
interesting stuff. As long as we're on the subject of basketball, let's touch on the what's going on with the Iowa schools this week. And right now, the Hawkeyes are up to number 4. They only have one game this week at Penn State. What is it, Wednesday, I think? Yeah, Wednesday night. So they should be in pretty good shape. I would suspect they'll take care of Penn State and stay about where they are this week. Iowa State is number 13. They've got a tough game tonight at Baylor. Then they come home and host TCU on Saturday. You look at the Big 12, and they're only like 7-5, but they're still in the title chase.
It's been kind of an amazing league. I watched a little bit of the Kansas-Oklahoma State game last night, and Kansas lost, got blown out by the Cowboys a couple weeks ago in Stillwater, and Okie State is down a couple players. They're really struggling. They lost another player for a while last night, and you have to give them great credit. They hung in there, and I think they lost by 20 plus, but they really made it interesting for a while. So the Jayhawks look good for a while, then they don't. Oklahoma has stumbled a little bit. Iowa State, you just don't know what's going to happen with them from week to week. They have such a little small margin for error because they lack depth. If an Abdul Nader has an off day, then they struggle. They don't have anywhere to go to really fill in for them. If Niang gets in foul trouble, they have issues. And if Jameel McKay, doesn't have his head on right, you never know where you're going to be. So there are a lot of teams that seem to have the capacity to get in a real role and play well, but they always seem to find a way to stumble. And the team that's most intriguing to me may be Texas. This is first year of Shaka Smart. They're very young, and yet they've come a long, long way. So I wouldn't be surprised in the least if, through all the quality that's in that league, that they somehow don't sneak in and win the tournament.
Could be. That thing is up for grabs, and whoever gets hot here down the stretch is going to wind up on top of that league. And then, of course, the tournament's a whole different animal. But
That's going to be a great tournament. That's going to be one I'm really going to look forward to watching, because really,
That quarterfinal round, you're
Yeah.
going to have great games, yeah.
yeah, all
Yep.
4 of them.
Every game will be good. Let's talk about the Panthers a little bit. That 53-50 win down at Wichita sent some shockwaves around Missouri Valley, at least. And that's 6 in a row for you and I. Now they're 8-6. Hopefully playing their way out of that Thursday night opening game at the Missouri Valley tournament. Big week this week at Loyola Wednesday, and then they host Illinois State on Saturday.
3 o'clock.
2 teams they lost to during the first go-around. And, if they can find a way to get these 2 wins, they're going to put themselves in really good shape.
I agree. This is sort of the revenge tour now for you and I, because they've been spending the last weeks knocking off teams that beat them. And Loyola is going to be a tough game. Loyola, I think, matches up with them well. I think they're deep. It's, for whatever reason, it's tough to win in that arena, as small as it may be. The Wichita State game is one of those things where if you look at the box score, you'd think it was a terrible basketball game. But it really wasn't. It was just competitive. They went right down to the end. Both teams struggled offensively, but made some plays on defense. And at the end, of all people, Wyatt Lohaus, who had been helping, but hadn't been a key part of the offense, it's 2 of the biggest shots, arguably, of the season. And those 2 shots helped you and I win. So now you have a situation where Wichita State will still win the regular season. No one's going to catch them. But now the thinking is that they look very vulnerable in the tournament, or more vulnerable than they did. And their NCAA tournament hopes are, if not in jeopardy, a little bit more questionable than they maybe were a week ago. Because, they're struggling a little bit. And as for you and I may be insane here, but I think that if you and I can get through the regular season losing maybe only one more game, get to the conference tournament finals, and maybe not even have to win it, I think they have an outside chance at an at-large berth. Not maybe a great percentage there, but I think that possibility exists if those things happen, and perhaps if they get a little bit of help outside, other conferences follow the right way.
Yeah, I agree with that. Their resume is pretty strong.
This is the greatest anecdote I can tell you, and I feel good as a parent because the debate with my 9-year-old son the other day is whether you and I, if they won the rest of their regular season games, was going to make the tournament without having to win the tournament. So we had this like 20-minute conversation. He's 9, it was awesome. You know, we went to a UNI game about a week ago, used the Courier tickets, and it was great. He kept score, and now he is debating on whether they're going to make the tournament if they didn't win, if they just won the rest of the regular season games. It was awesome.
A young Joel Lenardi, I mean,
Yeah.
there
There we go. You know, I got to watch that Wichita State game Saturday morning, and it was just a great college basketball game. I mean, you just don't see every time you turn the TV on, two teams that played that hard from start to finish on every possession. It was fun to watch.
And Ben Jacobson said it pretty well afterwards, excuse me, that if you and I had not matched that level of toughness that Wichita State brought, that they would have lost. I think that's true. I think that was a huge key going in there. The first time, I don't think that Wichita State necessarily intimidated UNI physically, but certainly they had an edge, and I think they established their game, and UNI really, really couldn't answer that. This time they did. They stood up to them physically. When Wichita State made that big run, UNI stood its ground, responded, and then took control of the game just long enough to win it. So it's a very, very encouraging sign for that program going forward for the rest of the regular season. They can win a game like that. Now all they got to do is finish strong, and the possibility exists that they can do that.
Hopefully the next time they get in that situation, and they're up double digits at halftime, they don't give up a 17-2 run, and they make a few more shots down the stretch so that it doesn't come down to a one-possession game. They're playing well, so it's fun to watch, and it'll be fun to watch going forward here this week, how these two games shake out. We've got another pretty good basketball team up at Northern Iowa with the Panther women, tied for first place, three-way tie. They have a huge game this week against Drake, which is one of the other co-leaders Friday night, 7 p.m. You and I managed to go down there and win. Nick, bring us up to date with the Panthers. They're playing great defense the way it looks.
Yeah, I covered them against Drake the previous game down in Des Moines, and that was probably one of their best games of the year. A really exciting game, high-scoring affair, and they had a lot of different people contribute at various moments. And you look at it now, you've got UNI, Drake, and Missouri State tied atop the league standings, and Northern Iowa leads the MVC in scoring defense, only giving up 51 points a game. They're leading the league in free throw percentage, second in assists. One other thing that's been key is they're leading in turnover margin. They're plus 3 turnovers a game and leading in three-pointers made. And really the difference maker for them has been Madison Weekly. She's kind of picked up her play, and if UNI can win the regular season, I think she might be a Player of the Year candidate. She's averaging 19 a game in conference play, and she's leading the MVC in three-point percentage, shooting 42% from three-point range, which is really good. It's a team that hadn't been making a lot of shots earlier in the season, and to have her shooting 42% from three with how well they're defending really has made them kind of a dynamic team. I think they might be the most complete team in the conference right now, but definitely it'll be a great game in Cedar Falls on Friday. Anyone that's interested in women's basketball in this area should definitely check that out.
It'll be hard to beat Drake twice in 1 year, but that would be a huge win for UNI's championship aspirations if they can pull that one off.
Yep.
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting about what Coach Warren said on Monday, if I believe I have this right, that she felt she was have to score with Drake a little bit more than we might have anticipated, just because you don't think you can shut them down completely.
Right.
And that's an interesting way to approach it. And I think to some degree they can do that. As Nick suggested, Madison Weekly has been pretty good. You know, Keitel can go off on any given night. So it's going to be a great game, I think. I think with all, you know, there's all these elements on the line there with in-state rivalry and conference title, and it should be a lot of fun.
Drake also has a serious Player of the Year candidate in that Lizzie Wendell, who puts up big numbers for the Bulldogs. So, yep, that'll be good stuff. Let's move back over to the men's side of college basketball for a little bit. We're getting into that part of the year when people start talking about who should be the Player of the Year, and I came up with a list of 5, 6, maybe 7 people who I guess I would have in that conversation. Some of the top ones on my list, I guess, are Buddy Hield of Oklahoma. I'd have Denzel Valentine of Michigan State, there, Ben Simmons at LSU, Chris Dunn at Providence, a couple of guys from Iowa and Iowa State, George Niang at Iowa State, and Jared Uthoff at Iowa, I think would have to be considered at least, and then maybe Mello Trimble at Maryland. You guys have anybody beyond that that you put in that conversation?
Those are the ones, because I watched most of the games I see are Big Ten and Big 12 games, so those, you hit the top of those. And you know, I thought the guy from Gonzaga, Kyle Witcher, he's a really good player. I like him. I think he's got a future. You know, I've seen them play recently, or late night TV, you know, one of those West Coast games. So maybe it was an illusion, but I think he's a pretty good player. As a player, I remember seeing him in the NCAA tournament last year. I like him a lot. And also, I printed out this wooden list to jog my memory, and they got Jared Uthoff only down as a sophomore, so I'm thinking Iowa and Fran are pretty happy that they're going to get Uthoff for another
2 years.
sixth and a seventh year, or fifth and a sixth year. So, yeah.
It's an interesting list, and I think that Buddy Hield is going to win, barring something foreseen down the road. Denzel Valentine's an interesting case too, because if you remember, he missed some games with an injury, knee injury, had it scoped, and the Spartans struggled a little bit. He came back, and it took some time, but they're rolling again. So you almost wonder if the fact that he was hurt and his team struggled won't help him down the line. Although, I guess team success is not necessarily a key component to this. There are all much things. You have to have a 2.0 GPA, for instance. You have to play both offense and defense, supposedly, in this to win it all. That might rule some people out of this list. George Niang was on my list, and he's kind of a complicated case for me. A great player, as good, as talented, and diverse as anybody on this list, but his team is so inconsistent that you wonder if that'll work against him. And the guy, I sort of borrowed a page from Joel Lenardi to bring his name up, and my last man out of the top five would be Bryce Johnson of Carolina. I think that someone from the ACC, you know, will be in the running. Maybe Grayson Allen from Duke. It could be any number of people, but I think that right now Hield is a prohibitive favorite.
Yeah, that's where I would probably go with that too. I mean, he's averaging 25.7 points, 5.6 rebounds, 2.2 assists, shoots 52% overall. He's 50% on three-pointers, which is incredible.
Yeah.
96 for 192. And then he's 90% from the free throw line, and his team is 20-3, and people focus their defense to try and slow him down, and they're just not able to do that. He's that good.
Yeah, the way I look at it is if you're going to purchase a basketball ticket and watch anyone in the country play, Buddy Hield's the one you want to see play this season. Just incredible with what he's been able to do.
Oh, I'm going to watch a lot of these guys play if I'm going to purchase a ticket. I mean, I'll go see Ben Simmons play. I mean, I'll go see Chris Dunn play. I enjoy watching Utah play. And, you know, Utah gives you that dimension of defense that some of these other guys don't, because he's got so many block
Yeah,
shots.
he's leading the Big Ten in blocks.
So interesting stuff, but yeah, I think I would have to point toward Buddy Hield probably right now
Yeah,
as a favorite.
he was exciting. That game against Iowa State earlier this year, and I saw him, I think maybe it was Kansas, where he made some incredible shots, clutch shots. So I think, yeah, he'd be my favorite for sure.
It's also high school wrestling time, and I just thought I'd throw this out there. Do we really need to have a state duals tournament and a state traditional tournament? We talk about this every once in a while. Not too many other sports do that, I mean, where they have separate tournaments and that much postseason for their teams.
Well, it's a hotly debated thing. I think in the state of Iowa, they want both, they just don't like the current configuration. And that's basically, they don't like this dual tournament the night before the individual tournament, which is, you know, I think that's the way they do it up in Minnesota. Actually, in Minnesota, I think they run it concurrently. The team tournament's running concurrently with the individual tournament. But they don't like it. You know, we saw it this year. Fort Dodge, ranked 31st in the nation, decided they didn't want to partake in the dual tournament, so they've wrestled their JV in the district finals, regional finals. And so they just could prepare for the individual tournament. There's so much tradition in the individual tournament, and that's a lot of the focus here. And especially, I think you look at the big schools. The last team to do that is, I think, Southeast Polk qualified the first year they had it the night before, down when they moved this to this new format 5 years ago. The night before, Southeast Polk wrestled, they qualified, and I think they wrestled maybe straight up their first match, and then they basically used their JV the next two matches. And it didn't turn out so well. They did not end up winning the traditional tournament that year. So there's two focus, you know, but then you look at the 2A and the 1A, and the traditional tournament is extremely important. You just look at Don Bosco, Gribbleville, they put it up there almost with the individual tournament too. They've won it 8 times. They love it. Some of the best wrestling I've seen, or best tournaments I've seen, has been in the traditional, you know, the rivalries, Don Bosco, Nashville, Plainfield, Don Bosco, Logan, Magnolia. Some of those finals were some of the best, most exciting, the most intense I've ever seen. But then when I think of that too, it was when the tournament was a week afterwards in Cedar Rapids. You know, and the reason why it got moved to Des Moines was they renovated the U.S. Cellular Center, and now I don't think the Boys Association's ever going to move it back.
We don't want to see them move it to a different time of year, so we have to have two separate state
Yeah.
tournaments. At least they're all together now. You point out one of the issues with the state dual tournament, and that is that not everybody, with the traditional tournament the next day, not everybody wrestles their varsity team, so it's not a very fair indication of who's the best dual team from that regard. Another issue that comes to mind is there are so few teams in the state now that can field a full lineup of 14 wrestlers. So you're taking basically, I would say, 2/3 of the high school wrestling teams in Iowa and telling them, well, you don't have a chance at the state duels anyway. So you're limiting the field to 1/3 of the teams that actually wrestle in Iowa. From that perspective, it's not a very fair indication of who the real state champion is. And why can't we do this as part of the traditional state tournament? Let's say, just for example, you take each of your district champions, you qualify your whole team for the state traditional tournament.
Oh, yeah?
So now when you go, because really right now, the team champion at the traditional state tournament isn't necessarily a reflection of who had the best team. It's a reflection of who had the most quality wrestlers at the state tournament. You know, whether you've got 6 guys and they all win championships, or you've got 10 guys and they all finish, 6th or 7th and rack up points that way. I think it would solve both issues if we went to a situation where take your district champions, let them qualify everybody for the state tournament, then you'll have hopefully, and maybe I'm totally off the wall and out of my mind here, but maybe you'd have a better indication of who the true team champion is.
Yeah, that would be interesting, but you're going to have to give me a couple extra days, because I think that tournament would last from like Tuesday to Saturday.
You would have to find another way to reduce qualifiers at the other end. wouldn't you?
Yeah. And that's an interesting concept. I've never thought of it that way. That would be really interesting to see that happen. It'd probably be a bigger field. You'd have to go to like 32 guys in the field. You'd have to actually day, or probably they'd have to go back to 4 days, Wednesday through Saturday, and that's a really interesting concept. I really haven't given that a lot of thought. But you could really definitely tell, you could make it a true champion that way, if or like you said, I'd have to really think that through, because you think if you took all the 8 district champions and they all came there for 3A, it'd be another separate tournament. You'd be talking another tournament. Put those 8, and then they all have 14 guys, and then you'd have an 8-man bracket, and then the winner of that would win it. That would almost be better than the duels.
Yeah, and you might have to go to just, instead of taking first and second from each district too, you might have to just take the district winners to keep the field under control. I don't know, just...
That's a real interesting concept, but I think if they were that would be almost something you could do to replace the duels. Take the district champions, and then that would be, you'd have 8 wrestlers in each bracket.
You're
And
going to
then,
get into an issue there, though, if you have a district where you have the 2 best kids in the state
Yeah.
in the same geographic area,
Yeah.
you don't...
this would be for like just a
a
team. I think if you were to do this would just be to determine the best team. And then you'd still have your traditional tournament with the individual, because you can't eliminate, you talk about a guy like from Clarksville who, the numbers are big, they're a small school, but what if they have a state champ? You can't exclude him from trying to become an individual state champ. He might be the best guy, he might be the only guy that's going to qualify from that school, but yeah.
He better win his district.
Yeah, better win his district, yeah, so.
And, you can make the argument that you have 2 of the best wrestlers in Iowa at the same weight in northeast Iowa at the same district. Well, one of them should have gone up a weight then, or one of them should have gone down a weight. And you'd have to think those things through before the season if only one kid at each weight's going to qualify.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate too. That you go to, when you're talking the traditional tournament, they're talking about, for years now too, one of the big things is seeding the tournament. You look at some of the pairings that just came out, and I've just described a little bit of it. But, in class, for instance, in class 1A, at 106, the top 4 guys are going to face each other in the first round, because they all came from the same, and their pairing formula, just those 2 districts lined up. And that's rankings. The rankings are for fun. There's people that put thought into them, but that's all for things. But anyway, in the 2 ranking services, basically the consensus top 4 guys
You could still get all the every other tournament throughout the season is seated. You know,
Yeah.
the Keith Young, they seed it, you get the coaches there. I think that's the biggest disservice, is not seeding that
My
tournament.
thing is, I think before the district tournaments, everybody should get together, they should get the coaches together, a central location, Fort Dodge would be the most central probably. Rent a big banquet room or whatever, get in there, 1A, 2A, 3A, and they go and rank the top 8 guys. If they make the start, they're gonna be seeded 1 through 8.
Yep.
Now, if one of those guys gets upset, then I don't know, you'd have maybe some alternates that would slide in, and then everybody slide up one. But see the top 8, and then you make sure those top 8, and then you aren't facing each other in the first round, and try to get the best, because there's some brackets here you look at where conceivably the people who argue that have the best 4 wrestlers, they're on one side of the bracket, and then,
And Saturday night's so special compared to
Yeah.
any of the other matches you compete in at the state tournament. You want to see the 2 best wrestlers going at it Saturday night, and they needed to do more to make that happen.
and we have some that the finals matches are gonna be in the quarterfinals, the second round.
Putting aside the question of formats and duels for a minute, it seems like, to me, one of the wrestling's biggest problems in a long-term standpoint is how do we grow or maintain our sport in the face of the dwindling number of high schools and a student population that's not getting any bigger. That's not to suggest that wrestling is in any deep trouble in that regard. It may not be, but you face the fact that, as Doug suggested, you have smaller number of teams that can't field a full dual team as it is. What's it going to look like in 10 years when you have, theoretically at least, a smaller number of high schools, where your pool of available athletes isn't getting any bigger? What happens then? And I think that's what wrestling's got to figure out, is how, with those problems, how do we address from there the postseason? What's best for the sport? I think they have to make some decisions, I think, and they're not going to be easy ones to make.
Yeah.
They may get to a point where they have to decide traditional or dual, because we won't have enough bodies to do both the right way.
And I think that's the way that the sport needs to go in general, long-term. I mean, we're good for now, and this is still a wrestling crazy state, and we're committed to wrestling coverage like no other newspaper in Iowa, but I think long-term, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, long after probably we're gone from this business, it's going to have to be a situation where there are not dual meets. Every competition is a tournament, and it's based on individuals. Independence brings, 8 kids over, and Waterloo West brings 10 kids over, or whatever it is, and you do it that way and determine your regular season that way, and then move on to your traditional state tournament. So it's always interesting stuff to talk about, and I don't think there's any push for change on the horizon immediately, but
Yeah. I know, I get it both. When we talk the state duels, I get Fort Dodge's perspective. They had a meeting before the season, all their kids came together, and they were all in agreement. Their goal, a lot of kids' goals in life, is to be on that podium Saturday night, walking in that grand march, and it's not, the top goal, it might be number 6, is to win the dual title. And that's what they came, they've done it 2 years in a row. Fort Dodge has actually done it 2 years in a row, where they've wrestled their JV and the varsity. And my big point of contention with that is, when they did it, and there's a big story, the Fort Dodge coach says, well, we've wrestled Southeast Polk, we've wrestled Western Moines Valley, and those 3 teams are all like top 50 national teams. And he goes, well, we've got some holes in our lineup, and my argument was, well, those holes, those kids, their goals, they got to be on the podium, but they might have 4 guys in front of them in their district that are better than them, and their highlight of their life could be wrestling in Wells Fargo in the state duels tournament, going for a team title there. And now those holes, you call them, you're denying them that opportunity to wrestle in a state tournament environment. And that was where I took the issue with it. I got where they came together and it was a team decision, but those guys, you're not, every team, rarely have you ever, only once I think ever has a team qualified all 14 of their guys to the state tournament. Or I think back in the day it was Don Bosco's, I think it was only 13 weight classes. So, that doesn't happen. There's guys, you have guys that are grinders that are pretty good wrestlers. There's guys better than them, they're not going to make the state, but if they could wrestle in that state, you're denying them that by not even going for it. Because Fort Dodge was ranked 31st in the nation, and they decided we're not going to go for it. And you're denying those guys an opportunity to wrestle in a state. That would be a big deal to me if I lost that opportunity. If I was a guy that was an important part of the team, but maybe, there's just, you have to face the fact. I have a good guy above me in my weight class, or above me, if I wrestle 126, of course I don't wrestle 126, but if I wrestled 126, but we have a top-ranked guy at 32 in our team and a guy at 20 that's, a top 5 guy, and I can't go up or down, and there's guys better than me in the state, but I contribute every day on a daily basis to win a duel, but now my coach says, well, we don't care about the duels. That would hurt me, I think, a little bit, as why am I here helping this team? why am I here, you know? But that was me off on a tangent.
Okay, you done?
I'm done.
All right, we need to wrap this up. You know, things are happening in the sports world with our high school basketball teams on the postseason trail, the aforementioned state wrestling tournament taking place, all of our college basketball teams kind of heading into the stretch of their seasons. We've got college softball, college baseball, hockey, you name it, it's pretty much happening right now. So, as always, you can stay on top of it all in our print editions or at wcfcourier.com, and we will be back again next week.